Good morning, everyone. Welcome today. I can see names sort of popping up on the list, so I'll give everyone a few moments to make sure they're connected before we get started. But welcome to you all, and thank you for joining us today. Good to see some familiar names on the list, as well as some new faces as well. So thank you for joining our Distinctive discussion. My name is Ariane. I'm a PR account manager at Distinctive and largely focus on supporting clients in property, the built environment and professional services. I'll start with a little bit of housekeeping, if I may, which if you've got any questions, please do put them into the questions tab as we go along, and that should be in the bottom right of your screen if it's sort of set up the same as mine. Pop them in there so they don't get lost in any of the chat, and we'll get to those at the end. We will put out a write-up of the key discussion points today, which will go out on the Distinctive website in sort of short order over the coming days. So please do look out for that if you'd like to revisit anything. And we will have some polls running during the session. So please do engage with those as they pop up on screen. We'd love to hear your views on those. So I'm thrilled to have Colette Flowerdew-Kincaid with us today, business editor of Southwest Business Insider, which is the title covering business news across the region, both in its printed magazine and online. For Insider, Colette covers news stories and in-depth features on key issues and topics for our region, and with her particular expertise in property and the employment sectors. Colette has been with Insider since April 2023 and has a sort of wealth of journalism experience prior to that, and has got sort of coverage from Monaco to Florida to her name, I think you said, Colette. So a real range of experience. She trained with the Press Association before moving into and started in yachts journalism before moving into the business space. And I've worked with Colette on a number of client stories to date for the magazine and online, and she's always very great to work with, very collaborative, and really gets some engaging news across. So we're very grateful to hear from her today. And I also know how busy you are, Colette, so thank you for taking your time out to do this session. If I may, could I hand over to you to give us a bit more about your background, your experience, and your sort of role at Insider as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Insider, I cover property and I cover kind of people, HR, things like that as my main remit. But I also end up covering, the whole breadth of the magazine, from tech to green energy. And, like Ariane said, we have our website where I write like shorter form news stories. I do video for the website, and we also produce our monthly magazine, which hopefully most of you will have come across. And prior to that, I've jumped around a fair bit. I started out in marketing, so I've done a fair amount of kind of writing for brands. And it was kind of through that I realized I wanted to get into journalism, which is why I trained with the Press Association. Like you mentioned, I did a lot of yacht journalism, which was where the Monaco and Florida came in. And you know what, yachts are very exciting, but it's nice to be covering a broad array of topics at Southwest Business Insider, some of which still includes yachts, which is great. We've got some good yacht builders in the region. But I will say, today, obviously, normally I'm the one asking the question, so it's a bit nerve-wracking being on the other side. But, I trust Ariane, so that's great.
Excellent. And it's a big old patch the magazine covers, the Southwest as a region, and you guys from Cornwall right up to Gloucester.
Yeah, it is a huge region. We really do try and get out and about as much as we can. Because, there's no point, our head office is in Bristol, and there's no point us just being sat at our desks all day and trying to imagine what's going on, in Cornwall. So, between Chris and I, we'll often be getting out of the office and meeting people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like, you know, there's a real range of stuff that you've sort of covered across your career. Do you remember the sort of first piece that you had published or the first piece that you wrote? 'Cause that's always stuck with me from what I've done.
Oh,
I've put you on the
wow.
spot there, haven't I?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not the first piece, but I remember, so the yacht magazine I worked at, to be a bit more specific, was about technology on super yachts. And I remember having to write a piece, and that the knowledge just has left my brain now completely. But it was a piece about how these yachts navigate and their systems. And when you're writing a story like that, you just become completely obsessed with it. So I was kind of spent like a week, as like I felt very knowledgeable anyway on this yacht navigation system, which was so out of my comfort zone. But also, you know, by the end, I felt like, yeah, I know my stuff. So that always sticks out as a kind of challenging one for me, but very rewarding.
Yeah, a lot to learn in quite a short space of time.
Yeah, exactly.
I imagine. So 2025 is sort of well underway. Christmas seems a bit like a distant memory, certainly for me anyway. But sort of what are some of the key trends, business trends that you're seeing across the region, and what sort of developments do you expect to shape regional coverage in the coming months? Are you sort of seeing particular themes in your inbox already, and when you're out and about speaking to businesses?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the return to the office kind of mandate by some major employers is a big one, and then you have that contrasted with people saying, "Oh, Gen Z will never return fully to the office; they don't want to." I mean, my personal view is, you know, we write all the time about the skill shortage. We do need those younger people to come into businesses, so to not be able to accommodate them seems seems unwise. But I think we'll continue to see that kind of clash, and businesses feel their way into doing what's right for them. There's obviously the conflict because businesses want to be able to make the most of their kind of commercial office space. They are paying for it, but you know, when we have the hybrid option, and that's been shown to be people's most popular option, you know, I think there's some kind of compromise to be had, and that'll just continue to rumble on, and hopefully businesses will be able to take the views of their employees into consideration. So that's a kind of office-based one. I think also, you know, from the kind of global stage feeding into the Southwest, we have the kind of the thing of Trump being in power and, you know, going against sustainability and DEI, and wondering whether companies here will follow that lead. Personally, that's not what I'm seeing. And I saw data that was saying in the UK, more widely, companies aren't ditching those DEI measures generally. I think over a quarter are actually upping their funding. So I think, you know, I'm not surprised that the Southwest would be kind of reinvigorating those schemes because, you know, we actually have, we're the second largest region for B Corp. Bristol has way more, like, if you put London to the side, Bristol has the most B Corps of any UK city by a really long margin. So I'm not surprised to see the Southwest kind of sticking to its guns and refusing to be influenced by the Trump regime. But that is something we'll see play out. And, you know, there might be some companies who are influenced by that. I mean, another one that comes to mind is house building. When the Labour government came in, obviously there was the promise of the 1.5 million houses to be built using the grey belt land. But I mean, we looked at this in the magazine a little while ago, and what people were saying was that the actual grey belt land, as it was defined, that we have available in the Southwest, isn't huge. And I think we need kind of 600,000 new homes in the Southwest by 2040. So it's, you know, that's another question of how we get that done, whether it's possible, and also bringing it back to business. If we need all these new people, we need somewhere for them to live. So
absolutely,
yeah.
And it's a particular challenge in Bristol. You know, there's a finite amount of space. You know, I'm based in Exeter, and it's the same in the city centre here. That, you know, the house building targets are there, but you need the space to put them. So how is that addressed?
Well, yeah, exactly. I think for the year ahead, I mean, one area that the Southwest is really kind of flexing its muscles in at the moment is tech and cyber.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the 1 billion Golden Valley development in Cheltenham. We have the Isambard AI at the National Composite Centre in South Gloucestershire. We've got some really exciting developments going on. And I think, well, I'm hoping, but I think we're starting to see more and more technology businesses call the Southwest their home, as they realize, you know, what great skill set we have here and what a good network of organizations we have that can kind of feed in and help each other as well.
And I think that's, really exciting, and it builds up, you know, the more news and the more sort of peers, I suppose, you see in business that are calling this, you know, calling the Southwest home, really ups the ante there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, little plug for the magazine, but we just did our January-February investment guide in the most recent edition. So I think that investment guide always kind of sets the tone for the trends and the core strengths of the region. So that's definitely worth a read if someone wanted to go into a bit more depth with anything I said.
Absolutely. And how can businesses in the region sort of take advantage of these trends in terms of engaging with you as a media outlet? So what sort of stories might you like to see following those?
I mean, I think so. First of all, I don't know if everyone knows, but in Insider we have our kind of media diary set as we go into a new year. And we will always be working in the trends that we see coming up. So although it's set, you know, we adapt it a bit as the year goes on. It's always worth asking me or the editor Chris for the most recent media diary that we have. That's a really good way to see, you know, they'll be covering that and I can feed in on that then. Yeah. We also send out a synopsis mailing list every month, and that sums up all the features that we're going to be covering in the upcoming magazine edition of Southwest Business Insider. So, I mean, that's really handy because we are inviting businesses to contribute. So you can see on there, and it gives a little summary as well, so you can see exactly what we're looking for. So I'd say, you know, that's probably the easiest way to engage. But also, you know, I'm very available by email or phone, to be honest. And I think don't be afraid to just get in touch if you kind of think, oh, I've got this great story, but I don't know if it will fit. You know, give me a call or an email, because as well as having the magazine, like we mentioned at the top of the webinar, we also have our news site, and that's, you know, that just gives so much more space to cover different stories.
Absolutely.
And also, as you know, as we know with news sites, they can be much more, you know, we can get stuff up more quickly, and that can be much more topical. So if we're covering a fast moving story, we know that it won't be like, oh, that's out of date in a week.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots of touch points, lots of opportunities there to get in touch with you and your colleagues. I'll bring up our first poll before moving on to the next question. So please do sort of respond to that. It should pop up on your screen. We're asking how often does your business engage with regional media? So regularly, is it sort of a couple of times a month? Rarely, never? Interested to hear what people have got to say on that one. I can see it sort of live sliding up. So clicked never yet, which is good to see. So
that's often, good, yeah.
Often, rarely. So, never. There is a never. I take that back.
No.
There's a real split there, actually. So, but I think we can largely say from that a large proportion are engaging with the media. So that's good to see. So people are, using your channels and you and your colleagues' expertise, which is great to see. So for those sort of on the list that have clicked occasionally and never, we'll have some sort of tips coming up on how you might do so later on. But you sort of touched on it in the theme slightly, Colette, but it's been an interesting, you know, not only for sort of the business world, but for the media world, it's been quite an interesting and eventful time. You know, some titles have had staffing cuts, you know, titles acquiring others, the rise in sort of home working and how that's impacted you. How has that been for you, sort of at Insider, and how are you responding as a team to some of those changes in the sort of media landscape?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It has been a challenging time for regional media. Some of our competitors, I think, have saw cuts in 2023, and yeah, I mean, for Insider, well, I want to make clear I'm not speaking for Insider, but in my view, you know, Insider was set up to be a regional publication.
Yeah,
We have Southwest Business Insider, but for those that don't know, we also have insiders all around the UK, and it was set up with the idea that businesses need the opportunity to share those regional stories. For us, like, you know, with the closures of other publications, it's never been more important that businesses are able to share their stories.
yeah,
And we're kind of, you know, we're investing more in our news site. We're doing more kind of interesting thing. We're testing out different email newsletters to see whether, you know, how those work for our audience. We're using a lot of video now to try and make sure that people can tell their stories in different ways, because we know that different audiences like, you know, and different age groups and different demographics like to consume their media in different ways. So I guess, in my opinion, we're really kind of leaning into making sure that we can be the ones who provide that regional coverage.
absolutely. It's a really valuable channel to still have, and I think we are quite lucky in the Southwest, or fortunate that there are still yourselves and other sort of regional titles going strong and sharing that news. So it's really great to see.
Yeah.
And has this all changed how you and your colleagues work? You know, and not necessarily sort of just working from home, but you know, the way you work with businesses. You know, you mentioned earlier you're still getting out to see businesses. Is that more or less than before? Has that changed at all?
I would say it's the same amount as before, but
Yeah,
what's changed is that I will probably arrive tripod in hand, so I'll be ready to shoot a bit of video content at the same time. Um, I suppose, you know, as we have the digital side to cover as well, it does make the schedule slightly more busy. But that isn't to say, yeah, we're definitely still trying to get out and about the same amount. I think, I suppose, with the news site, we're more able to see what people are clicking on and what our
yeah,
audience are interested in, and that's only a good thing, because then we actually, you know, we know that we're creating content that people are enjoying and engaging with.
yeah.
And then we have our magazine to go a bit more into depth. But I mean, to be honest, I think the role of an insider editor is one of the most interesting roles in journalism, because it's so mixed, and you really are privileged with getting out and meeting so many different businesses in your region.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we host a lot of events as well. So we host like smaller roundtable discussions, and we host breakfast panel and audience events. And that's absolutely not something that's going to be changing either. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's not too much change other than a bit more news site content.
Yeah, yeah, and like you say, you having to sort of go with that sort of rich media with video in mind and tripod in hand, and get sort of a real mix of content, not just the traditional written features.
Exactly, yeah. But I mean, it's pretty much wherever I've been, there's always something kind of visually exciting to
Yeah,
film. So, you know, sometimes you might be thinking, oh God, how am I going to make this multimedia? But actually, they're pretty, usually there is a really good way to, and you don't need to think too hard about it.
that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
And we'll move on to some sort of tips for those on the call today, Colette. And if you could share some advice on what sort of things you're looking for in terms of stories, what might make people take notice of your pitch. And I'll tie in one of the questions we've had through is what sort of advice would you give to businesses looking to raise their profile with the regional media? That's come in from Katie, so thank you for that. If you could, yeah, give some tips on engaging with yourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll answer the kind of side of how to make a kind of pitch jump out, and then I'll tie that in with Katie's question. I think, well, it's all linked, isn't it? Like, I think that first of all, I would say a pitch from someone I know is always going to jump out at me more, and that is just a kind of human nature thing. And with that in mind, if you're wanting to kind of work with us more, it's always worth like us maybe grabbing a coffee. I'm always up for that. Like I said, part of the job is getting out and about. So I would definitely advise, setting up some kind of chat rather than just emailing cold is always going to be a little bit more successful. I think, this is obvious, but like a subject line that really shows that it's about the Southwest and it's a kind of exciting story with a bit of a hook is always going to go far. Something that responds to something we've already said we're covering. Like I talked briefly about the mailer synopses. And I think that when I'm already working on an article and then someone says, oh, here's some commentary for it, that makes my life so easy. Which is always beneficial. But obviously there is still space for things that I'm not working on at the time. But just in terms of how to get a pitch to jump out, that is one way to get a pitch to jump out. I think in terms of how to raise your profile, I think all of what I've said are true. But I think as well, like it's not always the kind of biggest businesses that get coverage. We really do try and cover a kind of range of business sizes. I think it's all about coming up with a kind of angle that has got a bit of a hook. Like, I don't know, it's just about something, something slightly different. I think it's as well, like we host a lot of these roundtable discussions, like I said. I quite often put out call outs, inviting people to these discussions. They're a great way to instantly raise your profile because you're then being considered as a business leader on a certain topic. If you're at one of those roundtables, you're instantly in the magazine or on the news site, depending on where it's being covered. So that's another way, maybe if you're thinking, oh, I don't have a story in my head, but I know this person has good stuff to say, then I would recommend that. And I mean, we've got such a great team in at the moment that we've got, like, in terms of our kind of sales team, we've got so many roundtables this year. I'll definitely be looking for lots of participants. So yeah, I would definitely say that.
So people, I suppose, need to think about, what their, they and their colleagues are genuine experts on, what sort of topics they want to be, giving a good and interesting viewpoint on to get onto those.
What do you want to be? Think about what you want to be known for, and maybe work from there.
Basically. Excellent. It's quite sort of timely with the conversation, so I'll bring up another poll here, but to ask everyone what they find most challenging when working with the media. So we've put some suggestions in there. Is it crafting a compelling pitch, identifying the right contacts, securing coverage a bit more generally, knowing what's newsworthy, or is it something else? If there's something else that you find sort of most challenging, please pop that in the chat, and I will get to those. We'll see what people are saying.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting to see.
Knowing what's newsworthy. We're getting a nice even spread, actually, almost. So yeah, maintaining relationships with journalists seems to have come out the top ones. So I think you sort of touched on it there, but there's this debate, I suppose, in comms and PR world, but whether journalists have still got time to go out for a coffee and a lunch and still want to hear you over the phone. So on that point, maintaining a relationship with someone like yourselves, what advice could you give there?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say inside we definitely do. We are stretched for time, but that is what we will always make time for. and I love coffee. So I think, I imagine it can be hard. But like I said, you might think, oh, I'm sending loads of emails and they're not getting picked up. But I think if you have a relationship with that person initially by meeting them in person, whether that's for coffee or just for a quick chat, then it'll be a lot harder. Like, it's harder for me to ignore people that I know, and I think that's just human nature. So that's what I would advise.
That's great. And we've touched on sort of some of the things that it's worth doing. Are there any sort of things, the common mistakes, what should people not be doing, and what could they avoid when coming to you with ideas and stories?
Yeah, I mean, we are desperate for images. We are really, we really need, for the magazine especially, high resolution, which is normally a file over 1 megabyte, and it's normally around 300 dpi, I think. We need those for the magazine. If it's too low resolution, it won't be able to be printed. And sometimes people don't send any images, which is fine sometimes. But I think if there's one way that's gonna, if there's something that's gonna make it, a bit more likely to pick up the email, basically, it's having good images. So I definitely advise that. And Ariane, I'm always asking for images.
Absolutely.
I think there are so many good, there's so many good PR companies in the Southwest, so we're lucky to have them. I don't see that many mistakes being made. But sometimes I'll find it a bit frustrating because I'll get a pitch and I'll be scanning through and I'll be like, oh, this looks so exciting. And then I'll be like, hang on, is it in the Southwest? And it's not. And then I'm like, oh man, like I really wanted to cover that, but now I can't. And that's just a bit of a shame and a waste of an email, I guess. So so that's a mistake, but that probably doesn't come from PRs in the Southwest, because why would it? And I guess
there are obviously the other titles in the Insider brand, so it's just finding the right person at those for your business, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm pretty sure all of our contact details for all of the magazines are online. So it's very easy to find. I guess another mistake sometimes I see is the people might offer kind of a fully written feature, and they'll say, oh, do you want to use this feature in your magazine? And that's just not something that we offer at Insider. So that doesn't work for us. And that's not to say it's not to say that we wouldn't be able to use quotes from it. But if someone's just saying, do you want this full feature? And I'm busy, I might not necessarily think, oh, I could use some quotes from it. I'll just think, oh no, that's not relevant to me. And I think, one last one. It's just the thought that, like, if a press release is concerning two companies, it's so much more helpful if you have press contacts for both of the companies. Otherwise, like, you don't get to have the full story, and that's difficult. So I think going back to forming relationships, actually, and we did touch on this already a bit, but I've just thought, we do love getting out and about. So one thing that's, more likely to be enticing is kind of a tour of a facility or, a visit to site. That's a good way to build relationships and a good way to get potentially your story covered.
Absolutely. And we had a good one the other week at the fast pace opening at the forum, which and saw all of this in action as Colette arrived with her questions, also a tripod, and got some video content and print. So that's that full package. You talked about sending photos across, but what about video? Do you take sort of contributed video as well?
We do. What we probably would do, because it is great to have video content, but we normally put kind of our Insider branding on it and incorporate it into one of our wider videos. So it depends whether companies are up for that. But yeah, we definitely welcome video content as well.
Excellent. And how can we've sort of talked specifically about some of the stories there and some tips for sharing those, but how can businesses sort of more widely support titles like Insider? What, you know, other than the content, are you looking for anything else from them?
Well, one thing I don't know if people know, because it's fairly newly launched, is we have a platform on Insider now called Your World. And it's a place where people can just upload press releases. And then what happens is our digital news team will read through them, and they'll usually edit them into a news story, and then they'll end up on our website. And that's particularly useful for things like appointments or company milestones or moving offices, stories that are really regionally important and valuable, but they unfortunately are also the kind of stories that might get lost in mine, the editor's inbox. So I would say, one way is just using that platform more. Not to say that, if you have time, send it to us, send it to Chris and I as well, because that still might be useful for an upcoming feature we're writing. But if you're kind of thinking, oh, I just want this to be actually seen and maybe online quite quickly, that's a really good way to do it. Another thing, I mean, we mentioned it already, but the events we host, we are often looking for people to come to our roundtable events. And also we host our breakfast panels, and sometimes we'll be looking for speakers. And it's hard because I don't know for what reason, but sometimes I'll get emails after the event being like, oh, we didn't see this, but we would have liked to come to the event. Okay. So I guess just being like prompt with those responses where you can. Obviously, it's not always possible. I think another really handy thing is just always making sure you have your like PR or marketing team's contact details on your website. I find sometimes I'll end up ringing like a general contact line for a company, and they'll be confused as to why I'm calling, and they'll be like, why? Whereas if I was just speaking to someone whose job it was, that makes everyone's lives easier.
Absolutely.
So that's just a really helpful thing. And we talked about the synopses mailer as well. That's something everyone can just join if you want to, and then it's just such an easy way to engage with us. So I'd really recommend it. And feel free after this to send me an email if you're not on the list, and I can add you to it.
Excellent. I find that extremely helpful to look ahead to the key trends, and like you say, if you've got, as we said earlier, if you've got that sort of list or that understanding of what you and your spokespeople can talk about, you can certainly find space in there. So
exactly.
I will move us now, Colette, on to the questions. We've had a few through from everyone, so thank you for that. And if you haven't submitted a question and you have one, please take the chance to do so now. So the first question we've had, we've touched on the do's and don'ts, so I'm going to move on to the next one, is the difference between an editorial and advertorial. How can you tell the difference? And perhaps if you could explain a bit about whether you're looking for sort of both as well.
Yeah, okay. So I'm very much on the editorial side. So Chris and I, but Chris is the editor of the magazine, I'm business editor. We just deal with editorial. But absolutely, we have advertorial content in the magazine, and that can look like just a picture advert, but it can also look like a kind of advice column at the end of a feature. And I guess that is where maybe that's more what the question is based around. We will always have a kind of sponsor logo on our advertorial content. And I think it probably even says sponsored by this person. So it is normally clear that it's an advertorial, which I think is important. But having said that, I think there's a real opportunity in those advertorials, because by having yourself there, featured within this article on a topic, you can say what you want about the subject, get your viewpoint across, and really make your business look like an expert on that topic. So that's the key difference. And I think as well on our website there are opportunities like that. So we have our kind of themed blogs. I know we did one on house building where I think it was on house building where I did a little introduction, and then I think we had 4 different businesses writing blogs on their own topics. So there's loads of ways to engage with us advertorially as well. And like I said earlier, we've got a really great kind of business development team in place who would be happy to speak to everyone about that.
And does that, Colette, in terms of sort of raising your profile, is that a sort of good way, I suppose, to get a bit of a foot in the door, if as well, because then you've then heard about them as of your colleagues and may sort of look out for that content in the future?
Yeah, I'd say that definitely is a good way to get your foot in the door, but I don't want anyone to think at the same time, it's definitely not a situation where you have to sponsor this thing to be involved in it. It's all editorial content is always done on merit. But it's definitely a good way to show your expertise, because when people submit commentary for editorial features, they sometimes they shift in size and we can't always get everyone's comments in, as people know. So I think with the advertorial, you have the benefit of it, knowing it's definitely going to be there, which is, that's really strong.
Lovely, thank you. We have another one in. So the local regional media landscape seems more dominated than ever by clickbait and rage bait. Do you see this trend worsening? This question. And how can this sort of a follow up, but how can PRs work with local journalists to push back and secure quality coverage? So you might want to take those in two portions there, but thank you for that question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, certainly when you go on Twitter/X now, it's very rage baity. I try not to go on there where possible. I think, I guess because we do a lot of, because we're business coverage, it's a bit different to the kind of, sometimes I do see quite clickbaity local news stories, but I think our audience is different. And so absolutely. For us, we're keeping the focus on quality, and that won't change. But I guess I've definitely seen the trend, and with, like, to go back to Trump, with Trump being in power, he's, that kind of is his brand. So I can imagine it worsening. But in terms of how we can work together to push back, I mean, it's really about, thinking about what's the stories that are valuable, the stories that aren't clickbaity but are genuinely interesting, and I suppose pitching those in a way that I can see it's obviously a really valuable story. Like I said earlier, just give me a ring if there's something that you want to discuss, and we can kind of work out if it's the right story for our readers, and then I can make sure it comes out in a non-clickbaity but interesting way.
Absolutely. And I think to follow up on that as well, that we as consumers of media, everyone can, avoid those, stuff that's obviously clickbait, and engage with the positive and the more quality stuff, and that should hopefully help to push the trend as well, I would like to think. So
I think it is hard, because obviously clickbait plays on a very human trait. Like, you do naturally want to read those things, so I can understand why it's growing in popularity. And also, if you base your kind of success as a news site only on clicks, then you are going to be thinking, oh, well, these stories are doing well, we'll do more of those. But you're absolutely right, Ariane. Like, I definitely have to try and resist the urge to click on clickbaity things, and I think that's a good way to tackle it.
It's a challenge for all of us, isn't it?
Yeah.
The next question, you've touched on this slightly, but perhaps you could sort of sum up to to really get that across. But Katie's asked, how can we make life easier for newsrooms and for journalists? Perhaps you could give sort of a couple of three key tips to keep in mind.
Yeah. So definitely please send high resolution images. I can't, I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, what's also great is the better the image you send, the more likely we have, sometimes we'll use a really great image on our cover and then bam, you've got a cover shot. So if you do have those kind of images that you think that could be really good, they're either visually interesting or it's just a really great shot of someone. For example, on our I think it was our 42s under 42s list last year, we had we featured this baking company and they had amazing press shots. And one of them was the two founders I think they were holding a cake and there was flour everywhere. That's just a great shot. And we ended up using it on the cover. And brilliant. That's a great placement for any business. So that definitely makes life easier. What did we cover earlier? Just making sure that it is, I'm sure that the person who asked this question would, but making sure that it is clear from the outset why it's relevant to me. If I'm having to scan to be like, or even like sometimes I'll be Googling, like, is that company based in the Southwest? That just obviously makes life a little bit harder and takes a bit of time. I can't remember what we covered off earlier now. But I'd say those are the two big ones.
And having a clear hook, I think you mentioned before as well. What makes this newsworthy?
Exactly.
We often say to our clients, it's a sort of so what test. We need to think about why is this of interest outside your sort of sphere, outside your company, and that sometimes helps to really draw out the hook within that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, as I mentioned earlier, like if it's something like an appointments piece or a change of office location, we do now have that Your World platform where you can upload your news pieces. And that's another way to kind of quickly get stuff online. And then you can focus on speaking to Chris or myself about kind of maybe slightly bigger topics that are going to be used in features.
Yeah, absolutely. To go the other way, and again, we've touched on some of these, so sort of answer briefly as you like, but what's some of your pet hates when it comes to dealing with PR people and businesses who want publicity?
I mean, I think sometimes, I don't even know how I've ended up on these mailing lists, but sometimes I find myself on a mailing list for a business in Canada, and they'll be emailing me every day saying like, oh, our stock's gone up. And I'm like, who cares?
That's definitely not in your patch.
No. Well, maybe they think Southwest Canada.
Perhaps. Maybe that's the issue.
Pet hates. In general, just a very blanket style email. I mean, it sounds basic, but if an email starts with "Hi Colette," that's always going to grab my attention more than one that is just like "Hi." What else? I think as well, this sounds slightly harsh, but like sometimes someone will send a press release and then they might follow up with a phone call on the same day. Mm-hmm. And I would say, unless it's a really urgent story, I don't see a need to follow up with a phone call on the same day because honestly, I just feel bad that I haven't got through my inbox yet. And I'm like, oh gosh, I will get to it soon. Obviously feel free to follow up very shortly afterwards, but I don't think there's a need for the same day.
Yeah. And are you happy to sort of have those follow-ups over the phone? You've been quite open that you're happy to have a call and take people's ideas. I know some journalists are, it's sort of horses for courses, but you're happy to hear from people. And
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's always important to keep those lines of connection open. Otherwise, how are we going to know about the exciting stuff that's going on in the region? I definitely don't want to be someone who just relies on press releases without actually talking to people about it. So yeah, definitely, feel free to follow up, but just not immediately after sending.
Give you a bit of time to get to the
time.
Absolutely. Slightly aside from the media, this next question, but Gavin, who works in real estate, has asked which social media channels you sort of suggest. I assume for business content he's talking here. He said LinkedIn, yes, but which others are you engaging with people on? Are you seeing business content on, perhaps?
We've actually just, yeah, that's a good question. We've actually just launched Insider on Instagram, or that might have been last month. So we have an Instagram page and we kind of engage with people on there. Obviously LinkedIn, like you mentioned. Insider still does have a presence on X, but I'm not so sure how much we're using it at the moment.
Yeah.
I think those are still the big three. I mean, I know that... what was the, Ariane, you probably know this, what was the kind of new Twitter? Was it called Blue?
Threads or Blue Sky?
Oh yeah, yeah, both of them.
Yeah, well, they're competing for that title, I believe.
Yeah,
but yeah, Blue Sky and Threads are sort of becoming more as well.
And that's definitely, I don't think Insider itself has launched on there, but I think those are still worth having a presence on. I mean, it depends what your business is, because, for example, we had a company called Vanaways as our cover story last month, and they said that TikTok had already sold like 4 vans for them. I think the problem with TikTok is you need to think about your content in a much different way, as I'm sure everyone on this call knows, than you would for typical kind of business posts. So just requires a bit more thought, but could be fun. We haven't launched on there.
Yeah.
But it's always worth considering.
It does take TikTok and Instagram to an extent. The more visual channels do take that additional resource, so you want to make sure you're able to serve that audience and not sort of do a couple of videos and let it disappear.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You really don't want to be launching big and then immediately kind of flopping off. If you're going to do it, I think it's good to commit.
To do it well, yeah. Absolutely. So thank you for that question, Gavin. And I will, there's a really nice one come in, and perhaps we'll close with this one, but do you have a favourite story that you've worked on recently? And could you share a bit about that with us, if there is?
Yeah, I mean, this is so recent, but I did really enjoy working on it. So I think last week or the week before, I interviewed someone called Ed Bartlett, who has a business called Costume. And they make kind of sustainable cycle wear. But their whole story is really interesting because they're trying to actively change the kind of model of the fashion industry. So obviously the fashion industry as it is very wasteful. And their whole thing is that they do small batches. So there's never excess stuff that no one's using that goes to landfill. And because of the lack of waste, they're able to spend more money putting things, getting quality fabrics, for example.
Yeah.
And he also had a very funny story which helped with the kind of hook for it, that he'd pitched to a famous business founder in an ice bath recently. Wow. And when you have that kind of detail to be able to work into a headline, that is that kind of gives it an extra boost. But ultimately the main body of the story is about how this business is trying to change the fashion landscape.
Absolutely. And that's perhaps a good piece of advice within there as well. It is about that story and the people behind the brand as well, which I know is probably something you certainly comes across in the magazine. The corporates there, but also the people doing the work behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And he also brought some of the cycle wear along, and so it's nice to see it in person as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Costume with a K, I believe, isn't it? If anyone's looking, I read that one. Yeah,
Costume with a K.
Excellent. So I'm just going to have a quick scan of questions, and I think we have covered all of those off. So thank you to everyone for putting those in. And I hope those answers have sort of proved useful to everybody. If there's anything we miss or anything you think of after the time, please pop me a message. I'd be happy to sort of respond to that or share with Colette as well if there's a burning question that you think of as you step away. We've covered a lot today, and I hope that everyone will take away some useful tips, tricks, pieces of advice to use when engaging with the media. Sort of my key takeaways there obviously are the rich media, the images and the video is sort of vitally important, and can sort of open some doors for you, like you said, with the cover images, and to have those conversations really. I think it can be, people are thinking I'll just send this via email, but actually getting you out and about, picking up the phone, going for coffee and discussing what you or your business might have to offer is a good way to start the conversation. And I know that Colette will give some sort of honest advice on what she wants to hear or doesn't as well, but that has been really helpful. And I think that, think about the sort of key trends, the DEI, the return to office, and, look at the sort of Southwest media landscape and what businesses have to offer. I think we're sort of fortunate to have a wide range of different businesses in the region, and as an outlet you cover everything within that business landscape, so there's sort of space for everyone to share their interesting stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.
Very welcome. So yeah, I'd encourage everyone on the call to engage with Colette and her colleagues as part of your sort of communication strategy if you're looking to reach business media, and if it's something you think myself and my colleagues at Distinctive might be able to help you with, we would love to hear from you. You can drop me a message, drop me an email, find me on LinkedIn for an initial chat. Would be more than happy to do that as well. Colette, do you have any sort of closing remarks, or is there anything you'd like to add on to what we have discussed today that people might like to hear?
I don't think so. I mean, yeah, I really appreciate you guys inviting me on, and it's so nice to hear questions from people. And like Ariane said, please do feel free to reach out to me. I think my contact details are on the Insider website. I did want to do a very small plug for our Southwest Residential Property Awards, which entries are still open for another week. I think we've just got a nice pop-up for that.
There you go.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, it's it celebrates the region's best house building schemes, and it's just a great opportunity to have your hard work celebrated. So yeah, there's still time to enter if you want to.
And the event's in Bristol this year, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, it is. We're trialing out in Bristol, so that's very exciting.
Yeah, Ben and I were at the last one. It was a good night, so worth going and entering if you're in the sort of property space as well. Thank you for that. So there we go. We've got a few minutes to spare, but I'm pleased to have kept that to time. And once again, we'll say thank you, Colette, for your time. I think everyone sort of on the call will agree that was a really helpful session. So I appreciate your advice and your honesty there and your time. As I sort of said at the start, we'll be sharing the sort of some of the highlights, the key tips from this on the Distinctive website in the coming days, and I believe that'll come to you via email as well as sort of attendees today. So do keep an eye out for that. Do have a sort of read through and share with others that you think might be of interest, and it'll also be covered in our newsletter, our Distinctive Dispatch newsletter, which comes out the first Friday of every month. So I believe most on the call are subscribers to that, but if not, you can sign up here. I shall let everyone go and get to their lunch. Colette, I know you've got a bake sale outside, tantalising outside your window to go and enjoy.
And I'm looking at it now.
Excellent, a good treat. So I shall let everyone get on with the remainder of their day, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.